completely don't get how it is that you're sitting at the top of DOJ because you don't seem to be good at your job. Fact number 1, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. Fact number 2, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her.
This might be one of the most brutal takedowns of a Justice Department official we've seen in years. A sitting member of Congress just stood up in a public hearing and accused the Department of Justice of something explosive, not incompetence, but deliberate corruption. And the target? Former Florida Attorney General turned top DOJ figure Pam Bondi. But here's where it gets intense. Instead of asking questions like most lawmakers do, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett refused to even engage in the normal process. Why? Because, according to her, this witness has no intention of answering questions. And then came the line that changed everything. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. That's not just criticism. That's an accusation of completely broken priorities at the highest level of justice in America. So what actually happened in this hearing? Was this a political stunt or a rare moment where someone said what others were too afraid to say? Before we break it all down, if you want more raw, unfiltered political analysis like this, make sure you hit subscribe right now. Because videos like this, they don't get pushed unless you push them. Let's get into it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, I'm not going to ask any questions of this witness because this witness has revealed that she has no intentions of answering questions. But instead, I'm going to ask some very basic questions really quickly of my colleague, Becca Ballant, if she will answer right or wrong, raping children.
Wrong.
Right or wrong, killing random citizens.
Definitely wrong.
Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States.
Definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you, because I probably never would have got that with our witness. Our witness who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions. And then we also have this objection that we use as lawyers called non-responsive when a witness fails to actually answer the question. But nevertheless, let me address the survivors because that's exactly who they are. They are not victims, they are survivors. Let me say thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice. We are currently the laughingstock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ as we see kings and queens falling everywhere around the world. But we don't know the basics of right and wrong in this country because it's not about partisanship. And that's why I applaud Thomas Massie, because he's the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. But nevertheless, let me keep going. My Democratic colleagues have been attacked this entire committee hearing. They have been lied on, and frankly, the American people weren't looking for that. They were looking for answers about the corruption that they see coming from this administration. In the written testimony of this witness, of this particular witness, she stated that when she took office, she had two main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice, and second, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. And at your direction, DOJ has arrested Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. And I might add that y'all actually had a judge that rejected y'all for trying to arrest Don Lemon before, just like the grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Kelly, just like a grand jury rejected y'all as it relates to Senator Slotkin, just like the case against Tish James was dismissed and the case against Mr. Comey was dismissed. I completely don't get how it is that you're sitting at the top of DOJ because you don't seem to be good at your job. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting these journalists. In fact, we know after Georgia Fort and Don Lemon were arrested, we know that there were homes of journalists that were raided. We know that threatened prosecution against students protesting your actions and forced tech companies to remove apps used to track ISIS activities. But let's circle back to you protecting pedophiles and creeps, because I want to talk about the president and his possible involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't know what the president might have done with Jeffrey Epstein, but unlike this administration, I believe that facts matter. So let's talk about the facts. Fact number one, Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contains more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. Fact number two, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell made young girls available to Trump on multiple occasions. For example, according to this file, Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. Here's another example. This shows notes from FBI investigators that describe Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump, where he bragged to Trump that, quote, "This is a good one." Now, I'm not saying that the president is a pedophile, but there is a lot of evidence in these files that suggests that he's very close friends with a lot of men who are pedophiles. What's crazy about all of this is just that this is a big cover-up, and this administration is engaged in it. In fact, this administration is complicit. But there are numerous others, like how the DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in the investigation of the rogue agents who have murdered American citizens, or how the DOJ seized voter data from Fulton County in an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections, or how federal agents have Tom Homan on tape accepting a bribe and your agency killed the investigation, or how your agency is ready to give the president a $230 million payday, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution is clear. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. The fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history, an attorney general who has prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over the law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. And Mr. Chairman, I will yield.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized. Excuse me, gentleman from Kansas, the Attorney General, former Attorney General, Mr. Schmidt is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Bondi, thanks for being here. Did you have anything you wanted to say before we talk?
I do. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, my friend, for many years. I find it interesting that she didn't even want to try, Congresswoman Crockett, to ask any questions, because she certainly did not condemn her leader, Hakeem Jeffries, for taking money from Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was convicted. And I will be brief to give you your time, Congressman. This is what she didn't want to talk about. Texas, from Cuba, convicted, homicide, arson, weapon offense.
Convicted. So what are we talking about? Convict
Texas,
some of these perpetrators
homicide.
that rape these women that are sitting behind you, that you refuse to even acknowledge they are here.
Time belongs to the gentleman from Kansas.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a few seconds back to make up for the yelling? Thank you. General, did you have anything further to say?
What happened in that hearing wasn't normal. It wasn't even political theater. It was something much deeper, a complete collapse of trust in the leadership of the Department of Justice. And at the center of it all is Pam Bondi. Crockett didn't just disagree with her. She dismantled her credibility piece by piece. First, she attacked something fundamental, the role of a witness. In any legal setting, a witness answers questions. That's basic. That's Law School 101. But according to Crockett, Bondi wasn't doing that. Instead of answering directly, she was dodging, deflecting, and in some cases, completely avoiding the question. And that's where the criticism becomes serious. Because if the top official in the Department of Justice refuses to answer questions transparently, then what does that say about accountability? What does that say about justice? Crockett went even further, questioning Bondi's competence outright. She essentially said, "How are you even in this position if you can't perform the most basic function required in a hearing like this?" That's not subtle. That's a direct attack on qualification and legitimacy. But the real escalation came when Crockett shifted from competence to priorities. She accused the DOJ under Bondi of doing the exact opposite of its mission. Bondi had claimed two goals: end the weaponization of justice, restore the DOJ's core mission. Crockett's response? You didn't just fail, you reversed it. That's a devastating claim, because it reframes Bondi not as ineffective, but as actively harmful. And then came the most controversial part, the focus on journalists. Crockett alleged that under Bondi's direction, the DOJ arrested journalists. conducted raids on reporters' homes, threatened students protesting government actions. If true, that raises a serious question. Is the DOJ protecting democracy or policing dissent? And this is where the narrative becomes dangerous for Bondi. Because once you introduce the idea that a justice system is targeting speech, you're no longer talking about politics. You're talking about freedom itself. But Crockett didn't stop there. She escalated into something even bigger: selective justice. On one side, she claims journalists are being pursued aggressively. On the other, serious criminal issues, including exploitation crimes, are not being prioritized. That contrast is what makes the argument powerful. It's not just, you're doing a bad job, it's, you're choosing the wrong enemies. And in politics, that accusation sticks. Then came the most explosive angle: connections to the Jeffrey Epstein case. Now, Crockett was careful. She didn't directly accuse, but she did something arguably more effective. She laid out associations, references, and documented mentions involving Donald Trump and Epstein-related material. And then she framed it like this: I'm not saying it is, but the evidence raises serious questions. That's a classic rhetorical move. It allows maximum impact with minimum legal risk. And politically, it's extremely effective. Because once that idea is planted in the audience's mind, it doesn't go away. But here's the deeper issue for Bondi. Even if you dismiss the Epstein angle, even if you dismiss the political framing, the core criticism still stands: lack of transparency, questionable priorities, failed prosecutions, rejected cases, dismissed investigations. Crockett listed multiple instances where cases connected to the DOJ were rejected by judges, dismissed outright, blocked by grand juries. And her conclusion was blunt: you're not just controversial, you're ineffective. That's arguably the most damaging accusation of all, because in politics, controversy can be survived. But incompetence, that's harder to shake. And finally, Crockett closed with something that sounded less like criticism and more like a verdict. She said Bondi would be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history, not for one mistake, but for a pattern: obstruction over justice, loyalty to power over the Constitution, corruption over accountability. That's not just criticism. That's legacy-defining language. And here's the real question: was this a powerful moment of truth, or just another political attack in a divided system? Because depending on how you see it, this was either a necessary confrontation or a dangerous escalation. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns like this, raw, direct, and unfiltered, make sure you subscribe, because the next story might be even bigger.